Yeah, I think they do. You know, you can see now that with some smart moves, you can turn it around fairly quickly. You know, Kansas City, some of these teams without a whole lot of money have been successful. One of the things you have to look at, though, is, you know, the Astros picking really high in the draft helps for several years. And if you can get a Carlos Correa or a George Springer or, you know, Mark Appel hasn't even gotten there yet. But sometimes these teams like Tampa over several years had those high picks. And if you get 4 or 5 of them in a row, I mean, you can get a pretty strong lineup. So I think it's possible to do it fairly quickly. And one of the other issues you have to look at is some of these teams with big money to spend, like Boston or the Dodgers, you know, that might not spend it so wisely, kind of get themselves bogged down with these albatross contracts. And, you know, the Phillies, when they get some of these big contracts off their hands, are going to be much lighter on their feet.
You write in the article, it's about who's going to lead this team moving forward. They got a lot of young pieces. That's why Sandberg's probably not the guy anymore. It seemed like he could not communicate with some of these players. Is Pete Mackinnon making a case that he can communicate with these younger players and making the case that he should be around?
I personally think he is. You know, I don't know if you notice the same thing, but when I watch this team, yeah, they screw up a lot. You know, they don't run the bases that well sometimes. They throw to the wrong base. They do some dumb things. But, boy, they play with a lot of energy. They're kind of fun to watch. I mean, they're a team that doesn't seem to give up when they're behind. And, you know, my feeling with Pete is, look, they're not going to be contending for the postseason next year, the year after, you know, probably not even then. But do you really need to go out and get somebody else, you know, who's sort of a bridge manager to your guy? And are you going to go out and really try to get a high-profile name to manage this team? Why not keep the guy there who's doing well and seems to have built a relationship with these kids as it is? So I think you can make a case to keep Pete around for a couple more years.
Yeah, we're talking with Jerry Krasnick, ESPN.com, Major League Baseball writer, and, of course, his article about the Phillies and who will lead them moving forward here. I want to get your opinion, Jerry, on the moves that they made in terms of Ruben Amaro Jr. Is he being credited around baseball for pulling the trigger and making these deals, or was this something done that was above him, and are people kind of saying, well, don't give Ruben all the credit for what's going on there? How is he being perceived post-trades?
I think most of the people are giving him the credit. You know, I kept hearing, oh, it's Pat Gillick, and, you know, but every GM you talked to said, Pat Gillick wasn't the guy I talked to. It was Ruben Amaro. And, you know, he has his group of people, obviously, his advisors, and, you know, Charlie Kerfeld and Benny Looper and Dallas Green, and Pat Gillick obviously is above him in the hierarchy. But I think Ruben's getting quite a bit of credit, you know, and people said, hey, yeah, it took a while. Did they wait too long? Sure. But this was something that, you know, the Phillies have also emphasized to me that they really kind of put into play a year ago this time. You know, they said, look, we really have to start making these deals. And obviously it would have been great to do all of them earlier, but I think he did pretty well. You know, as I said, they're going to have a huge TV contract kicking in next year. They're getting Howard, Lee, and Ruiz off the books. The farm system is in much better shape. So if Ruben is not here, the next guy is going to reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, and obviously with Andy MacPhail here, is the feeling, Jerry, that still Ruben will not be here? I mean, I guess before the season, everybody kind of felt that's what would happen. In season, people felt that was happening. But these trades, as you said, it looks like the Phillies did pretty good. So is that changing, or do we still think that Andy MacPhail will handpick his own guy?
Look, we're all trying to read Andy's mind from a distance, and I don't really think anybody knows. I think, if anything, you can say is that he's a very methodical guy. I don't think he's going to be bullied into something by public sentiment. On the other hand, you know, they have to be aware of what they're be, and if Andy comes out, as I said in the story, after 3 or 4 months and says, you know, we've done a top-to-bottom review of this organization, and we think Ruben is the best guy, that might be a little bit of a tough sell job. But on the other hand, look, I mean, they are getting into the sabermetrics things more, and the other thing is, I'm not sure how much we can blame Ruben for everything that happened. I think, you know, everybody in Philly kind of has a sense that Dave Montgomery and the Phillies ownership certainly played a role in some of those long-term contracts. And, in fairness to Ruben, if you're going to blame him for things, you got to give him credit for the good things. And these prospect trades have been pretty good from, what people say who know guys in the minors and the younger players.
Jerry, there's a quote in your article that says that organization is a gold mine. Look at that ballpark. Look at that spring training facility. Look at the television deal. This is a goose that's going to lay a golden egg. No wonder Andy MacPhail came out of retirement. It sounds as if people are looking at the Phillies as a destination that is one that you want to be a part of.
Honestly, I don't want to sound like a, booster head in the clouds guy, but I hear that a lot. I think there's a lot of people who say, if I'm a general manager, that's the place I want to go because, the salary, the payroll is not going to be burdensome. They have beefed up the minors. They have a huge TV deal. Fans here, certainly, they're not going to the park the way they were, but has this place become completely apathetic to the Phillies? I mean, are they drawing 10,000 people a night? No, I think that place could turn around pretty quickly. So, not to be Pollyanna-ish about it, but I do think they're in a pretty good spot. Think about a team like the Red Sox having Rick Porcello's contract and Pablo Sandoval and Hanley Ramirez, $250 to $300 million in underperforming contracts. The Phillies are going to have all those deals off the books. So that gives the next GM a pretty blank canvas to try to put his imprint on the organization.
And apparently, you look forward, as you mentioned, there's still things to come with the Howard deal coming up, the Lee deal coming up. They still have some more money coming off the books here. And obviously, Pat Gillick had come out and said 2017 or 2018. Do you still think that is a fair assessment of when this team and the fans should expect to see a team being competitive?
I do, Mike. I just don't think they don't have enough power pitching. And you look at that division, a team like the Mets with the pitching they can roll out there. And I think, for instance, if the Phillies have the first, second, third pick in the draft, that's when they have to go out and get their Matt Harvey, that kind of guy who's going to be the staff ace for years to come. So I just don't think, they have added a lot of pitching, but I think we're talking about mostly, number 3, 4, 5 type starters. They don't really have that kind of ace. And Aaron Nola's a pretty solid guy, but I think most people feel like he's your sort of middle of the rotation 3, 4 finesse guy. So they're going to have to improve the pitching, and they're going to have to hit on these guys like Nick Williams and Jorge Alfaro, and J.P. Crawford's going to have to come up and play well, and Andrew Knapp. I mean, they do have some guys with promise, but as we've seen sometimes with these prospects, there's a lot of hype and they don't quite live up to it. So certainly hope for the best, but as we know, all these prospects don't always work out.
It's a really long, in-depth article, and you talk about, Amaro kind of being the lightning rod and obviously the interim guy here. But in a perfect world, does Pete Makinen want to be back here? Does he give an indication that, because it seemed like he didn't even want to do this to begin with. Has he changed? Has he got the feeling that, this is a better situation than what it was the day they asked me to do this?
I think he was kind of blindsided, and you have to look at Pete's career. I mean, here's a guy who's interviewed for 3 jobs and hasn't gotten them. He's been a manager, an interim guy 3 times. So I don't know that the guy wanted to get his hopes up. And when Sandberg left, it was like they gave Pete about an hour. I think they said, hey, they said to him, do you want to do this through the end of the homestand? And he was like, yeah, but, I think this guy probably wanted to maybe see if there was a possibility for him to be the long-term guy. And I definitely get the sense now that he would love to do this. I think he's having fun. I think the players like him. He speaks Spanish, so he's great with the Latin kids. The media likes him. I mean, he and people who followed him throughout his career kind of root for this guy. I think he's a good fit for this organization. And you know what? To me, you keep him for a year or two, and hey, maybe he surprises you, and in 2018 he gets the team to the playoffs. Do you really have to run out and get a name just for the sake of getting a name?
Yeah.
So I think he wants it, and quite honestly, based on what I've seen out of him, I think he deserves a shot to stay here for at least one more year.
You know, it's going to be an interesting offseason to see how they handle this. What kind of role will Pat Gillick have with the Phillies moving forward? Is he going to hand all of this over to, Andy MacPhail? I feel that that's an interesting dynamic, the Gillick-MacPhail, those two guys working together, or do we eventually see Gillick kind of phase himself out?
You know, if I had to guess, I'm thinking it's more the latter. You know, I just get the sense that Andy MacPhail is the president, and he's 62 years old. Does he need a 78-year-old babysitter? You know, and Pat Gillick has done about everything you can do in baseball. He's revered in the industry. He's a Hall of Famer. And, you know, I think it's a grind for a guy like that. I mean, could he stay in a sort of advisory role? Possibly. But Andy MacPhail probably can do the job himself if he has a general manager he likes. So, I see Pat really sort of backing off from the organization and not being as involved. And when I asked him about it, you know, the possibility of staying, he said he didn't know. But I just kind of got a sense that, you know, he's done enough and been through enough that maybe it's time to turn it over to Andy.
Another interesting storyline is that, we just mentioned the Phillies front office. And also, Jerry, they have some interesting things that they can do, the Howard and Lee we mentioned. But what about a young guy like Dom Brown? Some of the guys who are kind of in limbo on this team. Any feeling on the way the Phillies feel about those particular guys?
Well, I think right now what they're trying to do is let all these guys compete. You know, the Darren Ruffs and the Dom Browns, and they're saying, look, we're giving you an opportunity here. If you can pick it up and run with it, then maybe you're in the picture. But if we give you extended at-bats and you're mediocre, you just can't do it, then you're kind of falling by the wayside. So right now I think this period over the next month is a big evaluation period for some of these guys. And look, Dom Brown, if he doesn't cut the mustard, I guess he doesn't really have anybody to blame but himself.
All right, the Phillies finishing that 4-game setup with the Mets tonight. It's Aaron Harang throwing for the Phils. But as Jerry mentioned, nice to see young guys like Aaron Nola getting some time. We'll see if Franco can get back by the end of the year. He's been fun to watch. Herrera's been fun to watch. Getting to see Eichhoff pitch last night. At least, as you mentioned, the apathy. I think there was apathy, but that has been somewhat removed because they were able to move out some of these 2008 guys. I think that has changed because of these trades.
Yeah, look, you just get a sense when you go to the ballpark, and even as a writer, you know, before you'd go to the park and it would be like, when is Cole going to get traded, and when is Chase going to get hurt again? And now, you know, at least with young guys, you know all these guys aren't going to be great, but isn't it a kick to watch a guy like Odubel Herrera, who was a Rule 5 pick, hitting .292 with 25 doubles? Michael Franco, yeah, he strikes out some, and, you know, can he play third base? But when the guy hits it, he puts a charge into it. Nola's a kid you watch and you say, boy, this kid really knows how to pitch. You know, I think this is kind of what the Astros saw the last couple of years. It's like, hey, they're losing games, but when you're losing games with young players, they do bring energy. They run every ball out. They play with passion. They hustle. They care. And, you know, I think that's what people needed to see. And, you know, this is just my observation. I think when you go to a Phillies game now, it's kind of like, I might see something interesting tonight. You know, even like last night, it's, you know, they get down, they're getting crushed, they almost come back, then they blow up at the end, and Galvis makes some errors. Yeah, it can be chaotic at times and not pretty, but it's not boring, and there's something to be said for that.
He's Jerry Krasnick, ESPN.com. It's a great story, very in-depth piece, more on the Phillies at ESPN.com, at Jay Krasnick. You can click on the link right there on Twitter. Great stuff, Jerry. Good piece.
Thanks, Mike.